Welcome, everybody. Glad that you're here. This is our monthly HR Lunch Bunch hosted by HR Answers and myself. I'm Deborah Jeffries, if we've not met before. And today's topic is menopause in the workplace and how and what and where and it might be impacting us and our employees and those of us in HR and others who might be joining us, what we can do, how we can do it, and what that looks like. And so if you're new to HR Answers, we're an HR consulting and training firm. And if you're new to HR Lunch Bunch, we've been hosting this. This is somewhere close to, I know it's over 16 years. We might be close to 18 years now. I think I've lost track a little bit. We used to do this in person and now we do this virtually and gives that an opportunity for people around the state to join us in this discussion. Again, as I introduced myself, I'm Deborah Jeffries and I serve as the Vice President of our organization. I've been with the firm for over 30 years. And this was not my original idea as a project. It actually is a former employee. And when she departed, she wanted to keep doing it. And we said yes. And she needed a place to do it. And I said, you can. And then when she said, this is getting to be too much for me, and I said, I don't want it to stop. And guess what? I think that put me in charge somehow. So I'm definitely glad that you're here. My goal is to have a discussion, and truly my definition of a discussion is we talk to each other. So I encourage you to have your cameras on so we can see and truly chat with each other. And this is opportunity for us to network. Where are we from? So I encourage you to use the chat box. Let us know who's here. Where are you visiting from in that respects, in terms of what organization or what type of organization, number of employees. Give us a feel for, role of HR, if it's a more of a specific and specified specialty or more broadband or not HR at all. And feel free to unmute yourself and let us know that you've got something to say, or you can direct message me. I can see that in terms of using the chat box. That's great too. And not only kind of learning from each other and sharing ideas and information, but also resources that you might have. This is an opportunity not only to listen and learn, to share ideas and suggestions, but also pitfalls if we've encountered something. So, this isn't necessarily a new topic, but it is newer to our workplaces when we think about menopause in the workplace and what does that look like and mean, and how are we interacting with each other, and how are we handling this? Because this is impacting, and I think we're becoming more comfortable with this topic. I still think that for some people, can be a taboo topic. It's not necessarily a comfortable topic. It's like, how do I want people to know my business and what's going on, and whatnot? We certainly can share a little bit about that. And yes, this is called Lunch Bunch. So you're supposed to perhaps be eating lunch, so I can appreciate it that you are. When we used to get together in person, people would bring their brown bag lunches and they're like, can I eat? And can I eat and talk? And the answer was absolutely. And I always felt like I couldn't, only because I was facilitating. And so it was kind of like a small bite or something. And just when I would take a bite, people go, well, Deborah, how have so feel free. No judgments here at all. So I kind of broke this up into several sections, like here's some stats, here's some information, here's some questions, here's some resources. And again, so that you know, if you're new to this, we always send out a copy of the recording or a link to the recording and a copy of the PowerPoint afterwards. If you want to take a picture, feel free. If you want to take some notes, feel free. I just want you to know I'm more focused on a discussion. You'll notice I think I said that 4 times already, because that's really what the goal is. So just a couple of quick little stats for you. 6,000 people with ovaries. Now, I think one of the things that's important, when you usually Google this or we talk about this, more and more times you're going to see, quote, women in the workplace, all about women. Keep in mind, please, there are people who have made transitions. They've changed their sexual orientation, and that may mean and including those individuals too. So, and when we talk about age groups, one of the things that's true about this topic is it might be women in their 50s or people who have transitioned or whatnot. We can start having perimenopause as early as our 30s if there's been some kind of medical situation that's occurred for an individual and they've had a hysterectomy or some portion of their internal organs, their ovaries removed, that can actually put them into menopause immediately. So that could be as young as whenever that surgery has taken place. So keep in mind there isn't necessarily a guaranteed age range when we're talking about from an individual perspective. So when we think about who's in our workplace and what's our population, nearly 30% of our workforce at the present time is quote unquote the menopausal age. So count that as 45, 50 on up. But again, I think that's a moving target, so we've got to be careful not to do too much of a pigeonholing kind of thought process here. But if we talk about women in the workplace, 47%, and it kind of depends on who's doing the survey, because some would suggest that it's over 50% of women are in the workplace in terms of jobs held. And if we talk about executives, that number could be over 11% out of our highest CEO type positions. And now let's talk about people who are making decisions and how does that trickle down into our policies and procedures? But even at 47, that's 79 million jobs. That's a lot of positions held by individuals who could be impacted by this kind of set of activities or symptoms. And I would be curious for all of you in your workplaces and those of you who might even be part of this wonderful dynamic. How about if you like unmute yourself and tell me symptoms or use the chat box and feel free to type as fast as your little fingers can type. What kind of symptoms do you think go along with menopause? Because I think we might be surprised. I know I was when I had the opportunity to participate in some dialogue with others about how many symptoms actually are connected to menopause as a whole. So, what do we think? I think we could.
Uh, yeah, I was pretty surprised. I went into perimenopause at 41, and I'm fully menopausal now at 46. And I had the night sweats, hot flashes, insomnia. I'd never had problems with insomnia before, and that started. Even when I wasn't having hot flashes or night sweats, I still was just laying there unable to sleep, which was unusual for me. And irritability, mood swings. Hip pain started, and I didn't realize that was a common one. The joints don't aren't as lubricated anymore, apparently. So, but the weirdest one was formication, I believe is what it's called. The sensation of bugs crawling all over you. It's not very widely known, but it is a menopause symptom, and it would be horrible. I'd be laying there in bed, and I would check like 6 times, like just but the sensation was there, but obviously there weren't any bugs, so that was super weird and unpleasant.
Yes, yes, it's kind of the needle prickling the skin, just the itching of the skin or the dermatitis in some fashion bothering you. Yes,
I know,
good.
I know
I
for me,
didn't I didn't count, but it was a lot.
it was a lot.
Sorry, Monica.
No, no problem. I know for me, all of that I concur with. The most frustrating part when it comes to the work environment is the brain fog and the lack of retention and recall. It's like I used to think I was not stupid, and now I'm like so I've had to adjust massively how I work with lists and file folders in this, and because it just isn't there. Like, I mean, to this day, I know what the definition of immediate family member for FEMLA is. I still can't recite it because that recall just isn't there, you know.
Got it. Yeah. And I think that others can probably relate to that where it's My husband says to me, I'm worried about you. You have trouble with words.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, you know that place that you go to where you buy food items? And he's like, grocery store? Yeah, that place. And so it's like, that's kind of a common, and so I think if it happens enough to you, you start to even question yourself. Like, is this early onset of something else? And the answer is because this is not mommy brain. That has long since gone, right? My son is 22. So that's not what this is. And so on one hand, you begin to think, is something else wrong if you're not aware of those quote symptoms, then you start to think it's something else, or could it be? And your mind starts to think the worst and not, oh, this is one of those symptoms kind of thing. And I think that can be worrisome, not only to you, but then those around you. And if we're at work and it's popping up, then what are our coworkers or our boss thinking in terms of not able to recall information or share information or come up with the word at a maybe a pivotal time that we need to come up with it? Okay. So other symptoms, are we typing, or Jennifer, you popped up and you have something to share, or you just wanted to make sure you were more connected to us?
No, I just finished my lunch.
Okay.
I would add, just kind of based again on workplace experience, dysregulation, um, just behavioral, um, emotional dysregulation, and connections to things like depression, anxiety that may be more apparent or noticeable during that time period. Also, just sort of looking within my coworker cohort, a vastly differing view on what temperature is comfortable inside the office.
Right? Absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because I've talked with some folks, and hot flashes are the big things, but also some people have experienced a little bit of the opposite, or when they're starting to get to the tail end, now they're cold all the time. And so it's become kind of the opposite scenario, right? And so how long the hot flash might last, and that it's not just night sweats, it's throughout the entire day. And it doesn't matter where or where we're at. So some suggest that there's at least 48 different symptoms that could be tied to this. And there might actually be more. Now, with some research, they've reported that, you know, at least 13% have reported some kind of adverse work outcome because of their symptoms that are taking place. And that 11% of us have not come to work or been tardy to work, some kind of absence or whatnot because of our symptoms. And we haven't even talked about the headaches or the migraines that can prevent us from being able to do work or come to work in some fashion or another, let alone other kinds of body tenderness or soreness or aches and pains that come along with that, or even the lack of motivation that might be true. Some people have reported challenges with um, gums being a concern, brittle nails, hair loss, or in some cases, hair gain in all the wrong places. Can't speak to you, but I've had more challenges with, gaining a mustache or some a hair chin, hair chin, hair on my chin. I'm like, that didn't used to be a thing. I didn't have to used to worry about that, right? Let alone what you're seeing on the screen. And these are not things that we typically go around talking about, right? And so when you talk about those mood swings or the disrupted sleep, then how about that interfacing with our ability to work or do good work or interact with the humans that we serve in some fashion or another. And if we've got any kind of, some people have reported dizziness, let alone um, doesn't mean we're not showering, but our body chemistry is changing, which means a different body odor or things that we've body lotion or body spray or body soap that we used to use actually is not smelling like it used to on us. And if we're always used to it a certain way, we might not even notice because we're kind of like the commercial says, we're nose blind. But other people are noticing. Are they comfortable saying anything to us? Right? So, I mean, when you look at these kinds of things and even ones that might not be on there, because one of the things I've heard from some is we develop new allergies that maybe we never even had them before. Well, this is not nice. This is not kind to anybody. And this is us, not even the people who live with us. And they're dealing with this too. And they might not know as much as even we think we know. So being able to be thoughtful about pay, paying attention to our bodies, let alone how do we then communicate that to a coworker or to a boss that changes are happening or that we're experiencing these at the most inopportune time, like in a meeting or a one-on-one check-in or during an employee conversation when they're really struggling. And now we are too, because we're having heart palpitations and a hot flash, and we're really having a hard time concentrating on what the employee needs. They're sharing with us a terrible situation or a health concern or something that they need from us in a timely manner. And we're having a hard time concentrating on what's needing to be focused on them. Is that resonating with anybody? Maybe? Okay. All right. So being able to think about these. And so this, I think, gets at not only if if these things are true, and I believe that they are, and not necessarily all of them for everybody, but then they're manifesting themselves in our workplaces. How are we going to be able to work with that, especially if we have people who are at work, these things are happening, and a million people, a million women, I only have data that necessarily supports women. I don't have necessarily data that supports individuals who might be transitioning from male to female or making some other kinds of transitions or adjustments. What about what we're doing in our workplaces? Because this is suggesting they will leave, that things are so uncomfortable, that things are not working very well, that they cannot continue to work wherever they are. So they're leaving. That's not okay. And especially if half of our population that's working is female, we can't have these kinds of numbers departing, especially with the knowledge and experience that they have. So, one of my questions to you, and I'm interested in us dialoguing about this, I don't think our workplaces right now, in terms of our practices and maybe our policies or accommodations, I don't know if we're thinking about this in terms of how can we assist? How can we support? What do we have in place to aid, to support, to educate, and especially to retain our employees? So this is really what I'd like us to talk about is what do you have in place? Are you talking about this as a topic? How can we support menopausal symptoms in our workplace? Are you
Wouldn't,
guys doing talking? Please.
wouldn't this fall under the ADA a little bit if the person had the gumption to come forward with this? And again, I'm speaking from personal experience. This is a job I had before SDAO when I was having a particularly hard time physically myself, and personally my father passed. I just had a lot going on at one time. And I remember my boss at the time had commented on a work performance issue, and it was kind of like a light bulb went off. And I said, you know what? I have noticed that I am forgetting things. I have noticed that I'm not retaining, whatever it might be. And for me personally, that was a light bulb moment when I realized, wow, this physical thing can really manifest into the workplace. At that time, that particular workplace didn't do anything about it. It didn't proceed well, put it that way. But it's always this, when I saw this topic come up, I'm always like, yeah, this is something that is not something that the general population talks about. And I've complained to my boyfriend about this too. You know, we're told all this stuff at the beginning of life and what to expect, not at the tail end. And it's a shocker. So there's the ADA, but I think half of it is, and I haven't had that anybody broach this with me here from an HR perspective, but it's a matter of that I would think if a person came to me that I would, and because I'm a person of a certain age, I might be able to say, you know, this might be something that you have going on that you're not even aware of yet. And to try and support in that regard. So again, I see it partially falling into ADA, just partially falling into compassion.
Oh, I think both of those can be true. Absolutely. And I think it's also possible that one, again, there's a whole lot of topics that were um, so uncomfortable, maybe taboo, that we didn't talk about 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that we're doing a whole lot better now. We know more, we know better, we do better, right? We have more research, we have more information than we've had before, and that makes it when we're kind of armed with information that can help us. So, and this is just my viewpoint, so I'm kind of clear about some biases here. Um, it takes someone starting the process of being brave and bold enough to start the conversations in a workplace about something for other people to go, okay, we can talk about this. We should talk about this in some fashion, respectfully, right? And thinking about that. So that being said, then being able to say, okay, what would we do or how could we do it? What's appropriate in terms of making some adjustments that I think we can make some quote unquote accommodations without it having to be an AC, truly an ADA kind of accommodation. Being able to, can we have some fans that are available for people to borrow, check out? What's the right word? Can we have a health room for people if we've got some extra space or dedicate some space for people? It doesn't even have to be for this particular set of symptoms. Anybody who's having a migraine, a headache, who's not feeling well, who probably doesn't feel well enough to drive home right now, can they lie down? Somebody who is feeling very overwhelmed and needs to be in maybe a darker space. So being able to think about a health room just in general, a resource center that is full of information that can be about health challenges as a whole, that could be full of information of even including all your benefits offerings, right? And that might also have books, magnets, whatever that is pamphlets about your benefit offerings, your EAP. It also would have information about menopause. So being able to do something like that to be able to help. Do any of you have any policies or language or training for managers on how to have conversations or how to assist? Oh, okay. And Jennifer saying that we're designing new spaces that have wellness rooms. Terrific. I like that. Is anybody working on, or is it part of maybe part of a 2025 budget or part of an executive team set of discussions or this could even be an ERG group, So typically we might think of those being dedicated towards other things, but maybe maybe it's an ERG group around health issues or concerns, or maybe it's just menopause in general. You could have a variety of different ones if that made sense, or reaching out to employees and asking them um, health concerns. Keeping in mind, we don't want people disclosing things inappropriately, keeping HIPAA in mind. This one is a half support, half, I mean, if employees disclose things, they have the right to do that. We as HR, we as supervisors can't disclose information on behalf of others, but they can disclose it on their own if they're interested in doing that. So being able to think about those kinds of options. And I have others, but I'm just wondering whether or not.
Deborah, in the chat, I believe it's another menopause thing, vision. Caitlin, I might have that wrong. I apologize. She has
Yeah.
what I think is a really valid point, and one that crossed my mind is that there is still
Yeah.
it's called a male dominated world, just for simplicity, where if you come forward as a woman with another issue, so to speak, there's a great fear in that. And,
Yeah.
and even when you were just talking, my thought is, I understand that women supervisors could be empathetic to this, but, and I don't mean this in a derogatory manner, it's just nature. I don't think men supervisors can be as empathetic because they just don't have the same experience.
And I think that's where the supervisor training and education, um, many men might have a significant other that has gone through this, is going through this. And so if if that is something that we can tap into in terms of they care about that individual and they've been struggling or they've seen how hard it is on them, is there any way to be able to tap into that? I'm going to say those heartstrings of sorts, because the answer is no, it might not be for their female employee. However, can we make that connection of sorts? Because I think they might not be able to fully appreciate it because they haven't experienced it themselves. Your keyword empathy, can they get there? Can they appreciate how someone else might be going through that? But if we don't talk about it, if we aren't comfortable with the uncomfortable, then it's going to be one of those subjects that we dance around, right? And we need to be more comfortable with that, and maybe more so for them. But that also might be bringing in experts or people from the medical field who could answer their questions in a more comfortable way, or even in some respects, let's just call it a technical way, right? It doesn't have to be touchy-feely, but let's just talk about this from a medical standpoint about what kinds of things are transitioning and happening for a typical individual. And these are things to pay attention to, because if they're symptoms, there are signs and symptoms of things to notice and listen for, to pay attention to, maybe ask and inquire to make sure that your employee has what they need to be as productive as they need to be. And that's what we're talking about. If they're not able to do that, and dropping the temperature, having a fan, giving them opportunity to give a phone call and say, I'm having one of those days. I'll be in. I just might be a little late because I've had to change my clothes 3 times this morning because I'm sweating through everything, right? Or the fact that there's an opportunity to have a change of clothes at work, depending on our work environments, right? If I work in a manufacturing environment, do I have a locker? Can I have extra changes of clothes? Do I have time, maybe not just at break time? Can I have other times to change clothes? Or because one of the symptoms can be frequent visits to the restroom, Can I have an extra visit time to be able to do that? Some things like that too, because that might start getting us to the ADA component, right? Depending on what that looks like. So part of my part of my inquiry is I think we have to be upping the ante around these conversations. And so typically I usually ask this question more towards the very end. So, like what are you working on, or what could you start working on? How will you start sharing information with people inside your organization around a particular topic? And so I actually moved this kind of slide or set of questions up because I have some thoughts for you. If we kind of break it into three kind of categories, which is we need to create more awareness around this, just in general, we need to create more awareness around this. Well, one of the reasons why I picked this topic for the month of October is because it is Menopause Awareness Month. So in our workplaces as a collective, you still have an opportunity because near as I can tell, it's like what, the second of the month, which means you still have 28 days, 29, depending on how you define it, um, to bring it up, to put something out there in the lunchroom, in a newsletter, on Slack, instant messaging, whatever it is that you're using or doing as a communication channel out to employees, to bring awareness, share information, maybe bring somebody in, sharing out information via text messages, or when people open up their computers, there's a new set of data or research or a stat or something to bring more awareness to that. And the actual World Menopause Day is coming up on October 18th. There's a pinpoint day that we could target information out to folks. This is also something they can take home and share with other people regardless of their age. Maybe they have a mom they could share it with, or maybe grandma can share it with the daughter at home, or whatever that looks like. So being able to use these kind of national day holidays to bring awareness to all kinds of things for our employees, but this one could be the kickoff in 2024 for an annual event coming forward. And you start small because obviously there's not a lot of time. It's now, but you start this year with something small. Again, educating managers how to have a conversation, how to broach the conversation, how to invite people to see them as approachable to the conversation, that we want to be able to help. We want to make it more comfortable to work here or to get work done or whatever that might look like. Um, because I think it's really important for them to identify those issues early on, and ensuring steps are taken to address whatever kind of situation or need is there. And so the key really is perhaps even reinforcing and underpinning the care and respect, and to your point, Monica, the compassion that line managers, supervisors, um, must take in terms of being approachable, um, because otherwise employees will go the other direction. So on one hand, the training is around information, and the other training might be how to be more empathetic if we've got folks who aren't, or how can we bring more light to this in making more trusting conversations. So one of the things that I will make sure gets sent out to you is I found a resource guide that's designed specifically for managers, and we'll attach it to the information that we can send out. So want to make sure that you know that I mean, it's not like you guys can't Google this stuff yourself, but this is the kind of thing that people can look at. And you're right, health insurance carriers are a great source of information. And so whether or not it might be your health insurance provider, broker, maybe your EAP, I'm guessing that they might be great resources for information, maybe speakers that are coming out. Maybe they do a lunch and learn kind of thing. So if you have an employee assistance plan, or your employee assistance plan is built in to your healthcare coverage and provider, you might take a look and see what's there, what could be available in some fashion. You're already paying for that. Why not? In some fashion, take advantage of that. Um,
Deborah, you made me think of something because you folks have these supervisory series trainings on a consistent basis. I haven't partaken in one. Do you broach this during the supervisory series trainings?
no, we don't. That actually, to be honest with you, would be more like an advanced supervisory type class topic. So the basic level is, trying to do kind of more basic supervisory. When we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about empathy, but we don't go into necessarily a topic like this unless somebody specifically might ask a question about something. So you bring up a good point in terms of that. When we talk about maybe even if people are providing educational programming inside their organization around diversity, equity, and inclusion, you could piggyback this as a small little segment within the inclusivity component of things. If we're trying to build an open and inclusive culture, this would be one of those kinds of elements that you could. I don't want it to necessarily be quote unquote an afterthought, but the idea is if we talk about neurodivergent employees, when we think about as we age as a population, menopause can be one of those things for many of our employees, especially when we have 5 generations in our workplace. So you'd be able to kind of piggyback that in there very naturally and easily and be able to say, we've been gathering resources in our resource library. This is one of those things that if that's something that you're experiencing or believe you might be, and if there's something that you think might be helpful to make it a bit more comfortable in your office or out in the warehouse or wherever you're working, would you please talk to your supervisors and let them know that you would like to talk with them a little bit more about what can we do to make that more comfortable for you. So it doesn't have to be this, hour long something, but you've got a dedicated set of 5 minutes, 10 minutes that is around that built in within. That's a good way to get it started, right? Just making it easier for people who might be experiencing something to seek support, help, information. And in some cases, it might become an aha moment. Oh my gosh, I have those. That's happening to me. Is that what that is? We can't assume that people actually even know that they understand this is even happening to them, especially if it's happening much sooner than they thought it was going to, right? Okay. And in that respects, it's a respectful and a positive move forward. So thank you, Jennifer, for the thought process about the health insurance carriers. I really do appreciate that. So creating awareness, one bucket, establishing support would be our second bucket. And I already kind of mentioned maybe having a focused ERG could be could be an idea with related programming for education. And again, our ERGs are intended to be open to everybody who wants to learn, who wants to know more about something. So, and Monica, to your point, reasonable accommodation for individuals who are experiencing something. So again, quiet rooms, rooms with fans, being able to have fans for people. What might be other kinds of accommodations that folks need that might make sense? Talking to others and finding out even things that they did for themselves. Can we make that more on a grander scale with inside the organization? So I have schedules on here, flexible schedules. Um, there could even be people, we have mentors and mentees when we're talking about developing employees. Well, do we have anybody who wants to be like an activist, a champion, right? In this space, offering information, points of views, listening ears, to be able to have conversations about this. People who are in the know, who have been through this for others. So you tell me what else might be ways to establish support for our folks that might be experiencing this. Can you think of others? Can't have just these are the only great ideas that are out there. All right, well, if you think of others, let me know or put them in the chat box because I'm trying to think of what else I can share with people that might be helpful in this space. And then the third bucket, I think, is we really have to strive hard to normalize the conversation. Because people will often say, "Oh, I have a stupid question," and the answer is no. There's no such thing as a stupid question. The only one is the one you didn't ask, right? Because you didn't know something. When we talk about clarifying information around communication, direction, and instructions we get because of work, well, same thing here. So when we think about normalizing the conversation, how many of you remember during the last, not the current Olympics that we just had this summer, but 4 years ago during the Summer Olympics, when Simone Biles said, "I'm getting the twisties and I don't think I can do this. I'm in my head too much." Anybody kind of remember some of that activity? And then, and she wasn't the only one, but you notice that a lot of people over the last many years have been coming out and sharing. I've been having challenges around mental health. I've been seeking therapy. I struggle with, and more people, whether it was artists or actors or sports figures or whatever, were coming out and we have normalized. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't still work to be done around the stigma around mental health, but there's a lot of myths around mental health and a lot of stigmas that we need to continue to break down. But the fact that more and more people who we kind of look up to or revere or think are so talented that they have the world at their feet, they struggle in a variety of ways. They're seeking help and assistance. Well, if we can do that with mental health, I think we can do that with this topic as well. And so being able to normalize it and bring it out from quote unquote the shadows, and it's part of life for half of the population. And if you aren't going through it now, you will be going through it in some fashion or another, unless you're some kind of unicorn? And the answer is, and some people it's going to be severe and extremely uncomfortable and not okay. And others are going to have it not not so bad. They're going to have a little bit easier time with it, right? Some of us had surgery and instantaneously you're in it. There was no perimenopause. You were full blown. It happens differently for everybody. But if we can think about inside our organizations, we've got women, unless you're all male dominated and there isn't a single female around, continuity, consistency, always thoughtful, futuristic. What can we do? How can we help? That it's knowledge-based, information-seeking, growth-minded, futuristic. How can we support our people? We're here for the humans. I think that that's all big step in the right direction. And that, sure, we might be a little uncomfortable, might be a little awkward, but we can get through it on the other side. And especially if we're talking about, I, I can't speak for you. I, I will just tell you at HR Answers, we're highly female dominated. That 1 million people who departed the workplace because of symptoms and not feeling like they were supported in the workplace, that that theoretically would be the end of HR Answers. We'd have to have a whole new staff instantaneously if we all decided to leave. That would not that would not be acceptable. So being able to think about that. And we've been highly female dominated for a very long time. And I can honestly share with all of you, that's not been something that I think has actually come up in conversation. These are things that people are experiencing. And how are we helping? And as a leadership team member, I don't know that anybody has come and asked for anything special or acknowledging that, or if they have, they haven't talked with me about it. I know I haven't asked for anything special in that regards. And that was a whole like, thoughtfulness, wondering how many folks have been experiencing things. And I know there's been conversation about it in general about symptoms, but not any necessarily requests to make things better for. And I think that that might have been a miss to think a little bit bigger, given just the demographics of the office over the years. We're basically almost 40 years old. We're almost 40 years old. HR Answers in menopause. So, is there anything you guys are doing or thought about doing or discussing on your ends to help normalize the conversation? Jennifer, Kathy, Monica?
Well, what I was going to say is I hadn't even really truly thought about it until I saw this lunch bunch webinar. And then I kind of went, yeah, that's something that, at least here we have a split age group. We have the persons who are here and then the persons who are coming up behind. And like I said before, it's never been a topic that I was educated on. I just had to baptism by fire. And there might be some opportunity here to just help the ones that are coming up behind to know what to expect.
Yeah.
I would say that my work culture seems to be, it's definitely more on the, what do you call it? Female dominated work culture. Also probably the most forthright work culture I've worked in. So there really isn't any holding back here. So we do end up having some pretty candid conversations, I think, for those reasons, both in terms of composition of our workforce in that regard, as well as age. So I think it just seems sort of the one of the more dominant voices, and also pretty relaxed feeling that you can kind of talk about anything. So I feel like we're a little bit unique in that regard. Um, but it's also kind of refreshing.
Yeah. Well, I really like your word relaxed, which comfortable, easy to talk about things. What does that look like and mean? And so I think that would be a high value for many. Anything else in terms of trying to normalize the conversation? And and help me in terms also like other buckets. Those were my three main buckets in terms of, again, I'll click backwards here, create awareness. So education, information share, what are we doing? How are we doing it? Bringing it up. Is there activities? How are we doing that? Are we doing any of that? Establishing support for people. And you know what? My initial thought was people who are experiencing this, but I think also the support might also be to our male contingency if they've got people at home who are going through this. How might they be supportive? So this could be, flip the coin slightly different. We know that this is not a one-way street, that people are experiencing folks that are going through things. Here's support for you, or here's information to help them, or be of support to them, or more understanding in terms of knowledge and information, right? Or perhaps they become aware of it more so than their counterpart does. So we don't have to have this just be a one gender kind of, this is an all genders conversation, and thinking about it in that fashion, right? Let alone normalizing the conversation and making it okay to talk about, to ask about, to seek information, um, by all parties. And then I gave you a couple of um, links in here that might be able to be helpful in terms of some resources or places to go to learn more. And the lower ones, there's a lot of resources that out of the UK. They've done a whole lot more research and data gathering, even longer than the US has been doing it. And so those that have the asterisk next to them are more of the out of the US resources, and some of the data, and some of the research is definitely coming from them. But I think that in some cases it's easy to transfer that in terms of their ideas, um, some of their uh, some of their connection points or what's available to them obviously isn't available to us. But I do think it gets the juices flowing. Like, oh, okay, well, what would be the equivalent for us, or in our kind of organization? How would that match up in some fashion or another? So, so talk to me about questions or thoughts, or what's going on in your workplace, takeaways from today. What's going on for you? Or is anything going on for you?
I just want to say I'm glad to know I'm not alone in this.
Of course you're not. Absolutely
I
not,
know,
Monica.
but it's nice to have a conversation with other folks where you can sit there and go, yeah, that's happening to me too. It's okay. I grew up in a family of brothers. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
yeah.
Well, and we have another person who's here with us, but I don't know how to read your name in the little black box. So
Hi
I'm
there, it's Stephanie. How are you?
oh, hi, Stephanie. So it's like, yes, I don't know I don't know what's
Well,
going on.
you're great. This has been a really helpful topic. Uh, I think it's great that we're talking about these things out loud and naming them. I think there are a lot of things that in HR and as employers that we haven't named or that has been kind of a hot potato. So I think this is such a helpful discussion, and I think we need to normalize it as much as possible. And I feel like you've given really good tools. And candidly, as a woman, I feel like I should be so much more informed than I am. But it was great learning from each of you, based on your sharing, based on the content, the presentation, different areas that I need to look into, not just as an employer, but as a woman. So this is great. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely our pleasure. Um, yeah, and it's interesting because I think that that's one of those things that, um, y y you know, th- if I could be so bold as to say an element of the sisterhood from the standpoint of it starts with a single conversation, a single interaction. It's even, October is also breast cancer awareness month.
Yeah.
And it started with women struggling with that, dying from that, and not enough research, not enough knowledge and information, and it has grown exponentially. And it didn't have a ribbon, it didn't have a color. It was a disease that was killing people. It was not okay. And people took up the mantle and ran with it. And people who had a platform used that to educate others. And that's the kind of thing that I think can continue to happen. And then it's kind of like, well, maybe I don't know enough about that. And it usually is because someone close to us has some kind of experience or some kind of something, and we take notice, or all of a sudden something happens to us, and it's like we become much more aware. And if we can get it out there a whole lot faster, and sometimes employers can be slow to move on things, and yet it's been happening for years, right? Or we've been dealing, I mean, it doesn't have to be this heavy. I mean, it's a policy that's outdated. And it's not like we haven't known it's outdated. We just don't want to deal with it, right? Because we have to rewrite the thing, or right, or we're gonna have to then tell everybody about it or whatever. And the answer is, but it's not working for us anymore. It's not helping us anymore. Well, this is one of those where it's like, maybe we've lost some really good people because we didn't listen good enough to understand that's a connection to something completely different. It's not just that the supervisor was kind of crummy. The supervisor didn't know how to listen for some of the right things. And that was purely an educational kind of component. Maybe an empathy one. We can do better if we want to do better. So I appreciate those observations, because sometimes it just takes one, then we're off and running. So well, and to your point, Stephanie, if you've got some other thoughts about kind of hot potato topics, I definitely would like to know about those, because that actually leads to kind of the next one, which is topics. What should we be talking about at HR Lunch Bunch? Because I'm open to suggestions. These kind of germinate out of my own head, and things that I'm reading about, things that people are talking about. And the next one I think is, let's talk about how we're using AI in our workplaces. Truly using it. How are we as HR professionals using it? I can't speak for you, but I get emails, I think, just about every stinking day about AI and prompts and AI and HR and classes or programs that I can go to, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'd like to know how we're using it, how our organizations are using it. Do we have policies around it? Do we think employees are using it even though we've said don't use it? Or we've embraced it, kind of like our education system. There are some teachers that have said, you go for it. And others that have said, absolutely positively not. Really? So let's talk about it, because I think AI can be a wonderful tool for HR if they use it in the right way. I think it can be your assistant, especially for an HR department of one. So that's my little pitch, but that'll be on November 6th. And December, completely open. I've got time dedicated on the 4th and have no topic at this time. So I'm always open to that. So for what it's worth, that wraps up our time for October and menopause in the workplace. And I appreciate those of you who are live and with me here present today, and those of you who might be watching later on demand. We hope that we see you at another one, and have you join us. Otherwise, November 6th, 12 noon on the Pacific Coast time is where we will be, and I hope that you'll join us. Otherwise, I'm always the last one to leave this virtual room. So thanks for joining me. Glad that you're here. It's what we're all about here at HR Lunch Bunch. Network, network. Thank you
And I
much.
think maybe one of the hot potato things that I've been hearing just in the community,
Yeah.
the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act.
Yeah.
And we already have, from the Oregon standpoint, Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, I think it maybe nationally is a little nebulous, but maybe some conversation about that, but even some clarification around pump breaks,
Oh,
for expression of breast milk. In Oregon, employers are required to allow those breaks until the child is 18 months old, whereas federally it's 12 months. And it's intentionally vague as far as how much time is considered a reasonable break. So I think it might be worth it to have some of those conversations out loud. There aren't any guidelines about locked doors. Really, the only guideline about space is that it's private space, or it's that we're not requiring employees to pump or express best breast milk in a bathroom. But other than that, it's pretty wide open. So that may be helpful, to talk about.
okay. Thanks for that. I wrote that down, Stephanie. I appreciate it.
Great. Hey, thank you so much for all you do for us.
Oh, our pleasure. That's what we're here for. Thanks so much for
Thanks.
attending today.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us today. Take care and have a good rest of your week and a good October as well. We will officially sign off and take care.